Texas Panhandle, 1883. The harvest supper at the Cedar Falls Church happened every October. Long tables covered in checkered cloth, food brought from every kitchen in the county, the particular warmth of people who have worked hard through a season and have decided to celebrate surviving it. The church hall filled early. The food covered 3 tables. The conversation was loud and comfortable and entirely predictable. Walter Holt arrived at 6:30. He was 48 years old, the largest landowner in Cedar Falls County, known for 2 things equally: his fortune and his honesty. He did not attend many social gatherings, not from arrogance, but from the discomfort of a man who has been the most important person in every room for so long that rooms have stopped feeling like rooms and started feeling like audiences. He came tonight because Reverend Cole had asked him personally, and because the supper raised money for the school, which Walter considered worth supporting. He took a plate. He moved along the table. He stopped at the apple pie. He took 1 slice and tasted it standing there, with the distracted attention of a man eating because eating is necessary and food is fuel. Then he stopped. He took another bite. He set his fork down and looked at the pie the way a man looks at something that deserves more than distracted consumption. He looked up. He looked around the room. "Who made this apple pie?" he asked. His voice was not loud, but it carried, the voice of a man accustomed to being heard. The room shifted. The women who had organized the supper, Margaret Hale, Dorothy Crane, Louise Fairfield, the women whose names appeared on everything in Cedar Falls, looked at each other with the slight discomfort of people preparing to receive a compliment that is going to a different address. The question hung in the air. Then a silence arrived that was not comfortable, not because nobody knew the answer, because the answer was sitting at the far end of the last table in a beige linen dress, washed so many times the color had become more suggestion than fact, looking at her plate as if the question could not possibly be addressed to anything she had anything to do with. Her name was Rose Calloway. She was 29 years old, and she had been invisible in Cedar Falls for 2 years. Nobody in Cedar Falls had planned to ignore Rose Calloway. These things simply happen in small towns. When your husband dies and you refuse to cry in public or ask for help, people begin to look away when you pass on the boardwalk. It is easier to treat someone like a ghost than to admit you don't have the courage to help. She had come to Cedar Falls when she married Thomas Calloway in 1879. Thomas had been a good man, steady, honest, the quiet decency that doesn't announce itself. He had inherited a small farm on the south edge of town from his father, 80 acres of good Texas Panhandle land, sitting high enough in the plains that the winters brought the cold a winesap apple tree needed to fruit properly. Thomas had worked it honestly for 4 years before the fever took him in October of 1881. 2 years ago, she had stayed. This was the thing Cedar Falls had not entirely forgiven. Not the debt, not the widow's status, but the staying. The unspoken expectation had been that she would go back to wherever she had come from. She was not originally from Cedar Falls. She had no family here. The sensible thing would have been to sell the farm and go. She had not gone. She worked the farm with 2 hired hands she could barely afford, and managed the debt with the arithmetic of someone who has no margin for error. She planted, harvested, sold at market, made every payment to Harlan Briggs at the lending office on time, and appeared at community events like this one because appearing was part of belonging, and she was determined to belong. She brought food to every gathering, not because anyone asked, but because her mother had taught her that you show up and you bring something and you don't make a fuss about it. She had brought the apple pie tonight, her mother's recipe from Georgia, the apples from the winesap tree Thomas had planted on the east side of the property their first year together. She had set it on the table without announcement and taken her seat at the far end, where the light was dim and nobody was likely to notice her specifically.
She had been sitting there for an hour when the room went quiet, and Walter Holt asked his question. She cared for Thomas's memory the same way she cared for that apple tree, without drama, just making sure the ground around it stayed clean and the roots stayed protected from the Texas panhandle cold. The silence lasted 4 seconds. 4 seconds is not a long time by most measures. It is a very long time when a room of 60 people is waiting for someone to answer a direct question from the most powerful man in the county. Margaret Hale looked at the pie. She looked at Walter Holt. She looked at Dorothy Crane beside her. Something passed between them that was not quite speech. Then Dorothy Crane said, "I believe several of us contributed to the dessert table, Mr. Holt." Which was true, and which answered nothing. Walter looked at Dorothy. He looked at Margaret. He looked at the pie. He had been reading situations for 48 years. "I didn't ask who contributed to the dessert table," he said pleasantly. "I asked who made this specific pie." Another silence. Because at the far end of the last table, Rose Calloway had looked up from her plate, not to draw attention, because the silence was becoming the kind that someone was going to have to end, and she was constitutionally unable to let an uncomfortable silence extend itself past the point of dignity. "I did," she said, "without performance." Walter Holt turned and looked at her. The room turned and looked at her too. 60 people redirecting their attention to the woman at the end of the last table. The woman who had been sitting there for an hour without anyone addressing her specifically. Rose held Walter Holt's gaze with the composure of someone who has been overlooked enough times that being looked at directly has become slightly disorienting. "Mrs. Calloway," said Reverend Cole from across the room. Walter Holt pulled out the chair across from her and sat down as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The room continued to watch. "This is the best apple pie I have eaten in 20 years, Walter said. "I'd like to know how you make it." Rose looked at this man, the fine coat, the gold watch chain, the most important presence in the room, sitting across from her at the end of the last table. "It's my mother's recipe," she said, "from Georgia." "Tell me about it," he said. And he meant it. She could hear that he meant it. And it had been long enough since anyone in Cedar Falls had meant something when they said it to her, that she felt the difference immediately and completely. She told him about the recipe. The winesap apples from Thomas's tree, a variety that needed cold winters to fruit properly, which was why the Texas panhandle worked when the lower country didn't. The cinnamon fresh ground, not from a tin sitting on a shelf since before anyone could remember. The crust worked with lard and cold water until it was right without being overworked past right. Walter listened and asked 2 questions about oven temperature and the sugar ratio. The questions of someone who understood cooking well enough to ask useful questions about it. "You cook?" she said. "I did," he said, "before. My wife was a remarkable cook. I learned to pay attention to it." The room had gradually returned to its own conversations, though not entirely. "Mrs. Calloway," said Margaret Hale, appearing at the table with the composed efficiency of a woman reasserting a social order she feels has been disrupted. "We were hoping you might help clear the dessert table when the supper is finished." Rose started to stand. "Mrs. Calloway and I are in the middle of a conversation," Walter said pleasantly. A statement of fact. Margaret went back to the dessert table. Rose sat back down. "I apologize," Walter said, "if that created a difficulty for you." "It didn't," she said. It had, slightly, but not in the way he meant. "How long have you been in Cedar Falls?" he said. 4 years, she said. "Thomas Calloway's farm," he said. "The 80 acres on the south edge. I knew Thomas." She looked at him. "He was a good man," Walter said. "Steady, honest." "Yes," she said. "He was." They talked about Thomas for 20 minutes, and it was the first time in 2 years that anyone in Cedar Falls had spoken to Rose about her husband as if he had been a real person worth remembering. When she finally walked home that evening along the dark road, the Texas Panhandle stars enormous above her, she understood that something had shifted. She did not yet know what. Walter Holt rode past the Calloway farm on his way home. Not far from his usual route, he told himself he wanted to see the winesap tree. A tree that produced apples that could make a pie like that was worth knowing about. The farm was visible from the road in the October moonlight. 80 acres. The house small but maintained. The barn solid. The south pasture, fenced with the new Glidden 2-point barbed wire, the kind that had been dividing the Texas range since 1874, causing the fence-cutting wars that had men riding out at night with pliers and grudges. On a small farm like Rose's, good barbed wire fencing was not just maintenance. It was survival against the larger operations that would rather her land be open range. He rode on. In the morning, he went to see Harlan Briggs. Harlan ran the Cedar Falls lending office from behind a desk that always had too many papers on it and not enough light. He was 50 years old, precise, and had always struck Walter as a man who understood the value of other people's difficulties. Walter mentioned the Calloway farm in passing. Harlan told him, $160 originally, current balance $47, due December 1st. "She's been making the payments?" Walter said. "Every one," Harlan said. "On time, never missed." He paused. "But the 47 is due all at once. She doesn't have it yet." He leaned forward slightly. "I'll be honest with you, Walter. I've had an inquiry. Investor from out of the county looking at small properties in this area. He's made an offer to purchase the Calloway note." Walter looked at him. "Purchase the note." "If she misses December 1st by a single day," Harlan said, "the new holder of the note can adjudicate immediately. No public auction, no grace period." He spread his hands. "Standard procedure for a transferred note." Walter looked at the ledger, then at Harlan. "Who is this investor?" Harlan shifted slightly. "I'm not at liberty to say at this stage." Walter looked at him for a long moment. "I see," he said. He put his hat on. "Thank you, Harlan." He went to his horse. He sat outside the lending office for a long time. He thought about a woman at the end of a table who had made an extraordinary pie and gone unacknowledged for an hour. He thought about $47 and a transferred note and an investor who didn't want to wait for a public auction. He thought about barbed wire fencing and the particular vulnerability of a small property surrounded by people who would prefer it to be open range. He thought about what he was and was not going to do about this. Then he rode to the Calloway farm. "Before we go on, I want to ask you something different today. Most of you listening right now are somewhere in the middle of something. Maybe you're driving, maybe you're cooking or folding laundry, or sitting on a porch watching the evening come in. That's what Forever on the Frontier is for. If this story is keeping you company today, leave a like. It means more than you know. And tell me in the comments, what are you doing right now while you listen? I genuinely want to know. Now, let's get back, because Walter Holt has just learned that Rose Calloway is not only fighting the calendar, someone wants her land. He did not pay the debt. This was the decision he arrived at after 2 days of thinking. And it was the right decision, because anything else would have been charity dressed as something else. And Rose Calloway did not need charity, and would not have accepted it, even if she had. What he did was go to see her. He knocked on her door on a Thursday morning, and Rose answered with flour on her hands and the expression of someone interrupted in the middle of work, who was composing herself for the interruption. "Mr. Holt," she said. "Mrs. Calloway, I was wondering if I could see the apple tree. I've been thinking about what you told me at the supper, the winesap variety. I have an east-facing section on my property that might suit one." She looked at him with eyes that saw things clearly. "Come around the side of the house," she said. She showed him the tree. They stood under it, and she talked about the variety and the care and the harvest timing, and he listened with complete attention. Then he said he wanted to look at the south pasture fence. He had a man looking for fencing work and wanted to know what kind of work he did before hiring him for his own property. She showed him the fence. Good work. The Glidden 2-point wire correctly tensioned, posts at the right depth. "The man who did this," he said, "is he local?" "Pete Dawson," she said. "Works by the day." "I'd like to offer him 2 weeks' work on my north section," Walter said. "And I'd like to pay you a finder's fee for the recommendation. $5. She looked at him. "That's not how finder's fees work," she said. "I own a great deal of land," he said. "Knowing which workers do honest work is genuinely worth $5 to me." He held her gaze. "I'm not trying to rescue you, Mrs. Calloway. I'm trying to be useful in a way that doesn't cost you your dignity." She held his gaze for a long moment. $3, she said. "All right," he said. 3. She almost smiled. The real one, the kind that changed her entire face and arrived without warning. He rode home thinking about it for considerably longer than $3 warranted. He also sent a message to his lawyer in Amarillo about the identity of the investor who had made an inquiry to Harlan Briggs about the Calloway note. The answer came back 4 days later. It was not a surprise. It was confirmation of something he had suspected when Harlan's eyes moved slightly to the left when he said he was not at liberty to say. He came back. With real reasons. He had a large property and genuine needs, and Rose Calloway's knowledge of which local workers did honest work turned out to be considerable and accurate. Pete Dawson did good work on his north fence. He mentioned this to Rose on his next visit, which happened to coincide with her needing to discuss the water rights on her east section. He knew about water rights. She knew the section. October became November. The visits became a pattern. Not announced, not formalized. Real. He came Tuesday mornings and sometimes Thursday afternoons, and they talked about the farm and the land and the cattle and the price of feed. And he saw what she had built on 80 acres with the specific competence of a woman who had never had the luxury of not understanding what she was doing. Then, the 3rd week of November, one of her hired hands quit, found better paying work in town. 2 days' notice, fairly given. Rose now had one man short, 4 weeks until December 1st, $16 still needed, and the shadow of an investor who had made an inquiry to Harlan Briggs about her note. She did not tell Walter. He found out from Pete Dawson, who had heard it at the feed store. He came on a Tuesday. "I heard you lost a hand," he said. "I'm managing," she said. "I know you are," he said. "I also know you're 4 weeks from December 1st and $16 short and one man short simultaneously. And I know that Harlan Briggs has received an offer to purchase your note from a man named Victor Marsh, who is Harlan's brother-in-law and who has been watching your property for 18 months. She looked at him, very still. "How do you know that?" she said. "I asked my lawyer," he said, "when Harlan told me about the inquiry in October." She was quiet for a moment. "What does Marsh want with 80 acres?" she said. "He believes the railway survey coming through next year will run close to the south edge of your property," Walter said. "He wants the land before anyone else knows why it's worth wanting." She looked at the farm, at the cattle, at the barbed wire fence that protected her land from open-range pressure, at the winesap tree on the east side. Then she looked at Walter.
"What do I do?" she said. It was the first time she had asked anyone that question in 2 years. Walter looked at her.
"You give me permission," he said, "to go talk to Harlan Briggs, not to pay your debt, to inform him that selling a note to a family member without disclosing the conflict of interest is a legal matter the county office would find interesting. And you let me send 2 men to help with the cattle for the next 2 weeks, so your remaining hand can focus on what needs focusing on."
She looked at him for a long time. "All right," she said. "Thank you." He went. She stood in her yard and felt something she had not felt in 2 years. Not relief, but the specific feeling of being seen by someone who understood what they were looking at.
Walter's conversation with Harlan Briggs was brief and very clear. Harlan was a man who understood legal exposure when it was explained to him directly. The inquiry from Victor Marsh was quietly withdrawn the following day. The note remained exactly where it had been, $47, due December 1st, held by the Cedar Falls lending office, not transferred to anyone's brother-in-law. Rose did not know the details of what Walter said to Harlan. She knew Harlan stopped mentioning the investor when she made her November payment. That was enough. November 21st, $39, 8 short, 9 days left. She was at the kitchen table doing accounts on a Tuesday evening when she heard hoofbeats on the road, then boots on her porch, then a knock. She opened the door. Reverend Cole was standing there. Behind him, Pete Dawson and his wife, the Hendersons, old Mr. Marsh from the feed store, 4 or 5 other faces from the congregation. "Mrs. Calloway," Reverend Cole said, "we've been talking." He held out not an envelope, but a piece of paper, a contract, handwritten, signed by 30 families of Cedar Falls. "This is not charity," he said. "This is a work order. 50 apple pies for the county Thanksgiving bazaar, to be delivered in 5 days. We will pay the going market rate per pie. Every cent earned is yours." Rose looked at the contract. She looked at the faces on her porch. She thought about 2 years of bringing food to gatherings without being thanked. She thought about a question asked in October that had started something moving in this community. 50 pies, she said. 5 days. "Yes," Reverend Cole said. "Can you do it?" She looked at her hands. "I'll need 3 times the wood I have," she said. "It's already stacked by the barn," Pete Dawson said. "We brought it this afternoon." She looked at the wood, then at the people, then at the contract. "I accept," she said.
5 days, 50 pies. The winesap apples from Thomas's tree, the last of the season's harvest, every one of them. Fresh ground cinnamon. The crust worked with lard and cold water until it was right. Rose worked before sunrise and after dark. Her remaining hand helped with the apples. The kitchen was hot from the cast iron stove burning through wood at a rate she had never sustained before. She slept 3 hours the first night and 4 the second, and did not count after that. On the third night, at 2 in the morning, the wood ran low. She went to the pile by the barn and found it lower than it should have been. She had burned more than she had calculated, which meant the morning would come and the oven would die, and the last pies would not be done in time. She stood in the cold Texas panhandle night and looked at the wood and did the arithmetic and found the arithmetic insufficient. Then she heard it, the sound of an axe. She went around the side of the barn. Walter Holt was standing at the wood block in his good coat, splitting wood by lantern light with the focused efficiency of a man who knows how to do this and is not interested in being seen doing it. He had not announced himself. He was simply there, in the cold at 2 in the morning, with an axe and a lantern, making sure her fire didn't go out before the last pie was done. She stood and watched him for a long moment. He had not heard her come around the barn. He split 3 more pieces before he looked up. He saw her. He set the axe down. "The fire," he said. "I know," she said. Neither of them said anything else. She went back inside to the oven. He went back to splitting wood. At 5 in the morning, the last pie went into the oven. At 6:30, it came out golden and correct. Rose sat down at the kitchen table and put her hands flat on the wood and just breathed for a moment.
Outside, the sound of the axe had stopped hours ago. But when she went to the barn, there was enough wood stacked to last 2 weeks. She stood in the cold morning and looked at it. She thought about a man in a good coat, splitting wood by lantern light at 2 in the morning for a woman he had met 6 weeks ago over an apple pie. She went back inside and made coffee and waited for the sun to come up. She delivered the 50 pies to the county Thanksgiving Bazaar on the 26th of November. Every one of them sold before noon. She walked into the Cedar Falls lending office on November 29th with $47 in silver Morgan dollars, worn smooth from use, wrapped in a cloth on her kitchen table since the moment she had enough of them. She set the cloth on Harlan Briggs's desk, and he counted the coins and stamped the ledger and handed her the receipt. "Farm is clear, Mrs. Calloway." She said thank you. She walked outside and stood on the boardwalk in the November cold and looked at the receipt. 4 years of Thomas's work and 2 years of hers, and the farm was clear, and it was hers. She walked home. Walter came by on Thursday. She told him everything: the bazaar, the 50 pies, the silver dollars, the receipt. She told him directly, the way she told him everything. He listened. "Reverend Cole surprised me," she said. "People generally do," he said, "when they're paying attention." She looked at him. "You said something to him before he came to my door." He was quiet for a moment. "I mentioned to Reverend Cole," he said carefully, "that I had been thinking about the harvest supper, about how some contributions to a community go unacknowledged for reasons that don't reflect the value of the contribution." He looked at the farm. "I didn't tell him what to do about it. I mentioned it." She held his gaze. "Walter," she said. It was the first time she had used his name. He looked at her. "The wood at 2 in the morning," she said. He said nothing. "And Victor Marsh," she said. "And Harlan Briggs." He said nothing. "You've been very careful," she said, "not to rescue me." "You didn't need rescuing," he said. "You needed the obstacles that weren't yours removed." She looked at him for a long time. The Texas Panhandle morning was cold and clear, and the winesap tree was bare now for the winter, patient and permanent. "Thank you," she said, "for all of it." He held her gaze. "The pie was worth asking about," he said. "So was the person who made it." Neither of them moved for a moment. Then she said, "Coffee is on?" "Yes," he said, and he followed her inside. December was the month things changed openly. Not dramatically. Neither of them were dramatic people. The visits that had been Tuesday mornings and Thursday afternoons became suppers, first at the farm and then at his house. And the conversations that had been about cattle pricing and fence lines and water rights became longer and covered more ground. He told her about Ellen, who had died 5 years ago in the delivery of a child who had not survived either. He told it simply, the way he told everything difficult, without asking for anything in return, just as information he wanted her to have because she mattered enough to have it. She told him more about Thomas, more than the 20 minutes of memory at the supper. She told him about the first year on the farm, and what they had planned, and what the fever had taken, and what she had decided to do with what was left. The town was watching. Cedar Falls was going to watch. That was the nature of Cedar Falls. But the watching had changed quality since November. Margaret Hale brought a peach pie to the farm in December with a note that said simply, "I should have said something at the supper." Dorothy Crane stopped Rose on the main street and apologized in the direct way of a woman who finds apologies genuinely difficult and is doing it anyway. Small things. Real things. On an evening in January, sitting on Walter's porch with the Texas Panhandle winter mild around them, he said, "I have a practical question." "All right," she said. "The Calloway farm. 80 acres on the south edge of town. Good land. A winesap tree on the east side." He looked at her. "I'd like to propose that we file a joint land agreement. Both names on the deed, each retaining independent ownership rights. Neither party's property subordinate to the others under Texas law. My lawyer in Amarillo can draw it up." She looked at him. "You've been talking to your lawyer," she said, "about property rights for women under Texas law." "Since November," he said. "There's a provision in Texas statute that preserves a woman's right to her land as separate property within a marriage, if properly documented before the ceremony." He held her gaze. "I want to be clear. The Calloway farm is yours. It was Thomas's before it was yours, and it will be yours after whatever comes next. I am not asking for your land." She looked at him for a long moment. "What are you asking for?" she said. He looked at the January stars, then at her. "Rose Calloway," he said, "would you be willing to stop being invisible?" She looked at him steadily. "I was never invisible," she said. "The town just wasn't paying attention." "I know," he said. "I was."
He reached over and took her hand. She held it. The January night held them both, and the winesap tree on the east side of the Calloway farm stood in the dark with its roots deep in the Texas Panhandle soil, patient and permanent, waiting for spring.
They were married in April. In the Cedar Falls church, where the harvest supper happened every October, where Walter Holt had asked a question 6 months ago that had started everything. The ceremony was exactly the right size. The congregation, the neighbors, the people of Cedar Falls who had been paying better attention since November. Rose wore blue. Walter stood at the altar and watched her walk toward him, and thought about a woman at the end of a table who had looked up with the composure of someone who had been overlooked before and was done pretending it didn't happen. She walked toward him and thought about a man splitting wood by lantern light at 2 in the morning without announcing himself. After the ceremony, in the church hall, there was a supper. On the dessert table, in the center, was an apple pie. Rose had made it the morning of the wedding, the winesap apples from Thomas's tree, the cinnamon fresh ground, the crust worked until it was right. She had made it because it was her mother's recipe, and because it was the right thing to bring, and because some things are worth doing regardless of whether they will be acknowledged. Walter found it at the dessert table. He took a slice and tasted it standing there. He set his fork down. He looked around the room at the 60 people of Cedar Falls, at Margaret Hale and Dorothy Crane and Reverend Cole and Pete Dawson and old Mr. Marsh, at all the faces of a community that had been learning something since October. "Who made this apple pie?" he asked. The room laughed, not uncomfortably. The real laugh, the warm kind, the laugh of people who understand the reference and find it earned. From across the room, Rose Calloway, who was now Rose Holt, looked at her husband and said, "I did." "It's the best apple pie I've ever eaten," he said. "I know," she said. And the Cedar Falls church hall was full and warm, and outside the winesap tree on the east side of the Calloway farm was beginning to bud in the April light, its roots deep in the Texas Panhandle soil, patient and permanent, exactly as it had always been. Walter Holt tasted an apple pie at a church supper in October and asked one question. Who made this? Not to be kind, not to make a point, because the pie was extraordinary, and the question was honest. And he was a man who asked honest questions and expected honest answers. The answer was sitting at the end of the last table, in a dress washed so many times the color had become more suggestion than fact. That's the whole story. A question asked out loud in a room full of people who already knew the answer and had been choosing, without formal decision, not to say it. Nobody in Cedar Falls had planned to ignore Rose Calloway. These things simply happen in small towns. When your husband dies and you refuse to cry in public or to ask for help, people begin to look away. It is easier to treat someone like a ghost than to admit you don't have the courage to help. Walter Holt looked. And when Walter Holt looked at something in Cedar Falls eventually looked too. Not all at once, not without cost. 50 apple pies in 5 days and 3 hours of sleep a night, and silver Morgan dollars counted out on a kitchen table. Not without someone splitting wood by lantern light at 2 in the morning, so a fire would not go out before the last pie was done. The best things in any room are rarely the ones in the center. Sometimes they are at the end of the last table, waiting for someone to ask the right question. May God bless each and every one of you who listened today. Until next time, keep riding.
To the most beautiful woman I have ever known.
Oh, Henry.
I am the luckiest man alive.